We've all seen the movie The Matrix. It was interesting and fun on the big screen or the TV, but has it become a bit too real in your own life? Are you seeing glitches in the Matrix and trying to figure out what's happening? Have you been told that you've been tricked and that you need to fight against what they've done to you? The deception. Whether you're just beginning to notice, or if you've been searching for a more peaceful and congruent way to live without battling them, you're in the right place. I'm Ken, and I'll be joined by Eliza and Raina Stella. Let's explore together on the Liberty Ark. All right, welcome back to the Liberty Ark Podcast. This is episode number 3. We're going to go back and review a little bit from episodes 1 and 2. And we're evaluating a book that inspires us called The Great International Heist. Episode 1, we looked at You Are Here, figuring out where we're at so we can figure out where we want to go. And we'll review episode 2 and go into a discussion for episode 3. And welcome, guys. This is Eliza and Raina Stella.
Hello.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Ken.
Great to
Thank
be
you,
here.
Eliza.
And I'm Ken.
Yes, and thank you.
All right, so Eliza's going to do our reading for us this week. And then we will head into a little discussion. So you go right ahead.
Here we go. The Path of Liberation, Prophecies and Perceptions. Throughout the world, numerous indigenous cultures have held prophecies and beliefs about alternating periods of suffering and bliss. These prophecies often describe a cyclical pattern where times of hell are inevitably followed by times of heaven. However, it's crucial to recognize that these beliefs, while comforting, might serve as mechanisms of control, fostering false expectations. For countless ages, humanity has been under the sway of indoctrinated belief systems that promote the idea that enduring worldly suffering will eventually lead to heavenly bliss. This narrative convinces people that no matter how dire or oppressive their current circumstances, a better existence awaits them in the afterlife. This belief acts as a coping mechanism, enabling individuals to tolerate unbearable conditions with the hope of future relief. The cycle of control. In a broader context, this cyclical belief system can be seen as another form of control. It perpetuates a seesaw effect, where periods of suffering are interspersed with brief moments of perceived relief, only to plunge back into suffering. The cycle ensures a continuous state of dependency and control. The modern system of legal and monetary constructs exemplifies this control. It has been meticulously designed to maintain dominance and enslavement while offering the illusion of potential relief. This illusion comes in various forms, including the false promise of enlightenment, spiritual ascension, or even the biblical notion of the righteous being taken up into heaven. These beliefs act as psychological carrots on sticks, leading people to accept their current suffering with the hope of future salvation.
And that's the end of the reading. What do you think, guys?
Well, on our last conversation, we broke down, thoughts on path to liberation, just like Eliza just reread for us. And as we go, as we dig deeper, I think to this moment, right? If you really think about it, even like for myself, I just got off of another call, and it's interesting to look at how cycles of control are really all around us, and really almost every minute of the day from all angles. And it's interesting because, as we're exploring this ebook, it's really opening my eyes. And as we discussed last time, it's like, the the liberation really requires us to seek truth and understanding to be able to grow, right? And not simply accepting what is what is being said to us, what's been taught to us, but really more like what's being done to us. And I really think that I'm really happy to be able to be a part of this, because you just think about it, and it's so crazy how vulnerable we could be if we're not really looking for truth.
Right. And I agree with you, whether it's suffering for what a lot of people will term the hopium of either an afterlife or things being better, or just if you continue to pay to play the game, whatever that game is, that the reward is there. And don't worry, it's right here. It's right here. If you pay a little bit more, don't worry, we'll get it to you. So, exactly, this cycle of control on so many levels.
What amazes me, though, Eliza, is the fact that what's used on us is fear, right? Fear of missing out. What could happen if we don't move forward, right? The fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Fear is probably one of the biggest tools used just to
Yeah.
keep us going, no matter
Fear
what
and hope.
situation.
Yeah. Fear and hope. Fear and hope.
Yeah.
Cyclical,
Hilarious.
cyclical swing between fear and hope, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So,
what you said, Reina Stella, was interesting to me, and that is that it's all around us. I think it's humans are so subject to these cycles that even people without malicious intent produce cycles for us for mild influence, and which is a form of manipulation, right? But it leaves us open to much deeper manipulation if someone or some group decides to purposefully utilize it. But it's happening every day from us, from all angles, even with people without malintent.
Unintentional, but I mean, like, it comes from, it might even be like your own household. It could be your school, your employer, maybe even like, say, for example, I mean, personal experience is just having my own business. When I think about it, um, when the pandemic happened, that's when I realized, wait a minute, I'm not in control, right? Like, when we were requested by the specific organization, um, us providing the service, it was at least I thought it was my own business, my own decision. And even then, the control they had over us, where they had the audacity really to ask us to work for free, providing services to over 200 clients and not getting paid. And I had to sit there and analyze and say, wait, I have a team of 28 employees. Why is this out of my control? And it's actually, this is me thinking about this specific paragraph, the cycle of control. Even if it's your own business, sometimes you don't have full control over it, which is bonkers. It's crazy.
And the cyclical nature of it allows for slow progression in most situations, right? And it gets utilized to draw people gradually into allowing a loss of control that they may not have even considered allowing, except for they've already been through waves of attempts that then reduced back down. And each time you're a little more habituated or conditioned to not resisting or not even seeing what's happening. Whereas if they had not gone through the cycles, there would have been probably a much greater awareness of what was happening and a resistance to it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think about it, and we actually had prepared, knowing that could have taken place, and we were ready to pretty much say, you know what, we're okay. We're okay to say no, no matter what takes place. And I think that's where we have to start breaking the cycle of control, is to really sit down and put a stop to it, break it. But you can't have fear. And that's where, again, the biggest tool that's used on us. It's okay to go back and start all over if you feel you are in that scenario of, wait a minute, I've lost 100% of my control. And it's okay to go back and start again and really think different on how you're going to restructure this new cycle for yourself. For yourself and for the people around you, because it's devastating to have to face 28 families the next morning and say, we threw in the towel, you know. But to me, one thing that has helped me is a good way to start understanding the cycle of control is maybe by breaking down a timeline, which I think we covered a little bit on our last conversation, is really a timeline from when we were kids, right? To our teen years, to our 20s and 30s. And maybe if you're in your 20s and 30s, I mean, you stop there, but I mean, 30s and 40s. And then today, break it down and really analyze, okay, what has happened and what cycles of control do I remember experiencing during those timelines? And maybe start there. That might help you.
And for me, and we're all tying into this reading. It mentioned the legal and monetary control constructs, but that's tied into our conditioning, whether it's through social media, whether it's our upbringing, whether it's the educational system. It's the conditioning that we then respond. Like, I guess I have to pay the price here. I guess I have to do this. I guess I have to do that. Is it even because we don't consider an option for control to say no or to say yes? So it's that conditioning along with those other, like the legal and monetary and other constructs, that are so important, and how we can then take control and respond.
To me, one of the most clear examples of how cycles work is in abusive spouses. If you've ever known someone that was abused by their spouse, it always goes through cycles, right? And then when they think they're going to lose the person that they've been abusing, then they get all sorry and, oh my gosh, and everything, and the person comes back, right? And then that cycle just continues. They always come back to abusing again. And the other person finally has to meet their end, and then they'll come back again. And it's amazing how humans will allow themselves to go through that process instead of recognizing who this other person is and getting out. But there's a conditioning involved in that they almost, it's hard to explain this really. They almost want that abusiveness after a period of time. And one of the things my dad told me many, many years ago when I was a kid was, don't ever get in between a woman that's being abused and the guy that's abusing her, because she will turn on you in a second to support the guy that's abusing her. And unfortunately, it really does happen that way most of the time. Not 100%, but most of the time, that's the direction it goes.
Well, I'll comment to that, Ken. I really also feel like that's a part of our fear, because you mentioned if you know someone or have ever known someone that has been in an abusive relationship, how about in your own household, right? And you mentioned, of course, it might be different, maybe another male interfering with possibly that couple, but how about a daughter interfering when that when you pretty much had enough
Mm-hmm.
of what you've been seeing, and the results of it night after night after night, and even though you find yourself looking for ways to escape and not be a part of it, you know, playing 3 hours after school in athletic sports to get away from it, but then coming back and still knowing that it took place. Again, fear, you have to step in. You cannot allow it, and it's just that word just keeps popping up in my mind is we have to pull away from the biggest tool that everybody uses on us. And that includes, of course, being in an abusive household and being able to step up. Sure, it didn't happen on the first day or the first week or the first year, but it did, and it had to. It had to stop. And I'm not being very descriptive or clear, but I'm sure you guys can read between the lines with what you commented and being a part of an experience personally.
Yes, and I actually volunteered at a women's center years ago, and it's not just women who experience spousal abuse, but it was the abuse cycle going into the honeymoon period, and what we what we see is the fear of loss, the hope of really hoping for the better relationship, but a big part is codependency. And what we have even in these in everyday life, when we're talking about legal and monetary constructs, conditioning, that we have a codependency with, say, our jobs or whatever the system is. We don't know how to step away from it and be independent. In fact, that's fear, right? Yes, we hope for something better. We know that there has to be something better, that something's not right. But how do we step away? Where's the support system?
Yeah.
And that's what we want to offer here as well, are some suggestions that way.
That's really, really important, because everybody's always thinking, oh, I'd love to get away from this abusive situation, but I need something that they're offering, right? Well, the system does that also, right? The legal system, the monetary system, there's this, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me if I go outside of the normal bounds?
Well, yeah, with everything happening, you think about people like not having the courage to what we're saying, of course, like, say, for example, if we are being, let's say, financially, I guess the word might be abused, financially abused by the system, as an example, it's like we're too afraid to stop our routine to be able to stand up for what we believe in, because it will be a direct impact. And it is a very scary situation not having, say, for example, your full pay, right? Because you decide to stand up and you don't show up for work tomorrow, or, um, you now have, your kids at home and you're not going to have enough money to bring food to the table or pay your rent. Again, it's all financial dependency, right? We depend on that to be able to survive. How do we break that and not be so fearful of taking steps to help our situation out? Or do we allow the cycle to just continue? So, Ken, on that last sentence that you read, I want to bring us back to a scenario we're all very familiar with, but I want to make it clear that back then, when it took place, of course, it didn't cross my mind then because I had no clue what we're talking about today back then. Now, today, with us discussing this and the eye opener that took place about 18 months for me is we're all familiar with 9/11. Back then, I still remember vividly, of course, when it all began, me being in California and so forth, but just the silence of that day, of when it took place, um, was a very, very scary thought. And of course, we were all very fearful, not just for that one day, but for months and maybe even to this day. But what happened after the fact, right? Where you mentioned it has been meticulously designed to maintain dominance and enslavement while offering the illusion of potential relief. I mean, a lot of things took place after the fact that, in a way, I find it very similar to a cycle of control that has been implemented with that situation. More surveillance.
And that's a fantastic example of how a situation created a request from the people for the very thing that they never would have allowed had that situation not occurred.
Right.
And now
Like we
that
know,
persisted, right? We never
Yeah.
went back to the freedom of before.
Mm. So this is
Isn't
an
that
example. Yeah, it's an example of the system wanting to do something. So we'll create a problem so we can now give this pre-prepared solution. And it's usually a loss of some rights replaced by privileges and benefits. Illusion of potential relief. And the potential means hope, a hopeful relief, a hopeful carrot. It's not a real carrot.
And then you think about it and you really put that into, like, was it really just a loss of rights? I mean, you think about the devastating scenario that took place on that day. It wasn't just rights, right? A lot of people lost their lives. And again, as I mentioned, if you really break down childhood, teenage years, 20s, 30s, you'll find, many scenarios that'll give you ideas of what cycles of control are. Another one that took place that really was impactful for me was the 2008 housing market.
And it's interesting that as you look back on that now, there were quite a few people that were sounding the alarm, and it was pretty clear what was coming. But when people are on the high, they don't listen to that, right? And so then the crash comes. And what's amazing is they lose their memory over time to where the same kind of thing can happen again, which I think personally we're kind of about there again. And the markets always go in cycles like that because people lose their memory and redo the very thing they did before and just don't learn from it.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I've lived through 5 decades of being told how to think, how to live, how to spend, how to behave, right? From the classroom to the job market, the television,
Conditioning.
conditioning, right? So, I followed the path we all were being sold. And now I see the system for what it is, a cycle that keeps repeating unless we choose to break it.
Correct.
And that, I think, is a big reason why we, Ken, Eliza, and myself, we've decided to talk to you, and talk amongst ourselves too, in a way, talk to you, and not wait 20, 30 years to realize you've been playing by someone else's rules.
Do you recall? I remember when I was little, I heard of that experiment of Pavlov's dogs, and the experiment was that you ring a bell and you give the dog a treat. You ring a bell, you give the dog a treat. Eventually, when you ring the bell, there's no treat, but the dog will still start salivating. That was the experiment. So now we're conditioned when the bell rings, we now feel a certain way and are primed to react a certain way. And so we need to look at, are there bells being rung, little ding, that we're acting or primed to act in a certain way that we need to break that? And we all have a ton of them, and we all have a lot of, we all have a lot of reasons to come together as a community to analyze how to break free.
Well, we do have the power to say no more. We do have that power.
We do have the power, but we have to have the awareness. And I think the awareness is the real key. And sometimes when they do these cycles, they go a little too far and allow people to become more aware. And I think that recently happened, and a whole lot of people began to question what was happening to us because it just got taken too far. So my hope is that people will not lose their memory and forget that, but instead make good decisions and search out and question how can they keep that from ever happening to them again. And that's what we're here to help them evaluate, and not tell them what to do, but just to help with the awareness, and help them find ways of seeing what's happening and searching for options to get the control back. So, these beliefs act as psychological carrots on sticks, leading people to accept their current suffering with the hope of future salvation. So I would encourage people to listen to their own words, listen when they're saying things, and are they saying, oh, I've just got to put up with this because... Maybe you don't. Maybe it feels like you do, but there might be options that you're not aware of. So any final words from you, kind folks?
Well, I would like to say that freedom doesn't begin when someone gives it to us. It begins when we see the cage and decide to step out. And we can't really change what we can't see. But once we see it, we will have a choice. And that choice is power. So it's definitely interesting, right? When I say you can't change what you can't see. And that's where the awareness comes, Ken. You have to be aware to be able to make change.
Now, one phrase that I like a lot is the best slave is the slave that doesn't know he's a slave.
Right. And my final thought would be that if we are looking for resources, and if there is someone to introduce us to some thoughtful resources, the first step we still have to do is be willing to step out of the box that we discussed in, the last couple of podcasts. It takes that self-analysis and being brutally honest to say, as tough and independent and free thinking as I think I am, let me rethink that and step out of whatever my box and however big and that I think that box is, go one step further to be able to embrace any new thinking.
And if I can say one last thing, Ken and Eliza, on today's episode is, to me, the truth, right? We may not be able to escape all systems per se, but we can stop being ruled by them, right? You can step outside the loop mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And from that place of clarity, we get to choose what's worth for us to place our energy on it. We become the creator. We get to select where we use our energy. So I want to leave you with this question, is ask yourself, what is one belief that you have accepted, but you are ready to question?
That's a fabulous thought.
It is. It's very brave and very, very empowering at the same time.
Yep. But doable, one at a time. One belief should be easy to question. A whole bunch of them at once may be a little difficult.
A little overwhelming, yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much, Eliza and Reina Stella. And we will be back for the 4th podcast shortly. Thanks.
Thank you both.
Thank
Been
you
a pleasure.
guys.
Bye-bye.
See you soon. Bye.
The views expressed in this Liberty Ark podcast are for informational and educational purposes only. They do not constitute legal or tax advice, and they may not reflect the official positions of anyone at all, really. We want to express our appreciation to the authors of the unpublished manuscript titled The Great International Heist, on which the Liberty Ark podcast is based. Rebecca and Jonathan Rodrigues, the authors, provide courses that go into much greater depth and are available at libertyarkpodcast.com/white rabbit.